Arthur Jenkins sat on the worn plastic chair outside Miller's Gas and Go, his hands wrapped around a lukewarm coffee cup. The morning sun was just starting to push back the long shadows stretching across the cracked asphalt lot. He was a man carved by time, his face a map of wrinkles, his movements slow and deliberate, like a clock ticking away the final hours of a long day. His clothes were plain, faded jeans, a simple flannel shirt, a beat-up baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Anyone looking would see just another elderly man, blending into the quiet backdrop of this small, dusty town forgotten by the main highway. They would see a man who likely spent his days tending a small garden or maybe fishing down by the creek, a harmless fixture of the sleepy community. His eyes, though, were anything but slow. They scanned, they observed, they catalogued details most people missed. The way the wind shifted dust, the subtle tension in a stranger's shoulders, the distant rumble that wasn't just a truck on the road. Arthur Jenkins wasn't just an old man. He was an old man who had seen things, done things, in places and times that felt a million miles away from this peaceful porch. His hands, gnarled with age, still held a memory, a muscle memory that pulsed faintly beneath the surface of his quiet life. A life he had built deliberately, piece by careful piece, after the last echo of chaos had finally faded. Miller's Gas and Go was more than just a place to fill up, it was the town's unofficial meeting spot, the hub of local gossip, the place where you knew you'd see a familiar face. Old Man Miller, a hearty fellow with a permanent smudge of grease on his cheek, ran the place with a gruff kindness. He knew Arthur wasn't just any old man. He saw the stillness in him, the quiet strength that lay coiled beneath the surface. He'd seen Arthur handle a few minor disturbances over the years, always with an unnerving calm and efficiency that seemed impossible for someone his age. Miller didn't ask questions. Some folks, you just knew, had stories best left untold. Today, though, the quiet was about to shatter. The distant rumble Arthur had noted earlier grew louder, deeper, transforming from a faraway sound into a visceral tremor in the air. It wasn't a single truck. It was many engines, powerful and loud, announcing their arrival with aggressive intent. The sound filled the valley, echoing off the few surrounding hills, a sound that spoke of disruption and dominance. A moment later, they appeared. A line of motorcycles, gleaming chrome and dark leather, roared into the Gas and Go lot. They were the Iron Vipers, a biker gang that had recently started muscling in on the smaller towns along this stretch of highway. They weren't subtle. Their jackets were emblazoned with their intimidating Cobra logo, their faces hidden behind dark sunglasses or scowls. They moved with a swagger, a sense of entitlement that immediately poisoned the air. The leader rode a custom-built machine, larger and louder than the others. He was a mountain of a man named Razor, known for his cruelty and his short fuse. He killed his engine with a flourish, the sudden silence almost more jarring than the noise had been. His followers fanned out, parking haphazardly, blocking pumps, their eyes sweeping over the few customers with open disdain. Fear rippled through the small lot. A young mother quickly ushered her children back into her car, locking the doors. Old Man Miller stepped cautiously out of the station's entrance, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a wary tension. The air thickened with unspoken threat. Arthur remained seated, his posture unchanged, his hands steady on his coffee cup. His eyes, however, were no longer scanning the horizon. They were focused, taking in every detail, the number of bikes, the general age and build of the riders, their weapons, some openly displayed knives, the bulge of pistols under jackets, their formation, their demeanor. It was an assessment born of long habit, a lifetime of evaluating threats. Razor dismounted, stretching slowly, his leather jacket creaking. He was clearly enjoying the fear his presence generated. His eyes landed on Arthur, sitting alone at the edge of the lot. He smirked. An old man, minding his own business. An easy target, perhaps, or just something to mock for entertainment. He sauntered over, his boots heavy on the ground. His followers watched, some chuckling. This was their ritual, asserting dominance, making everyone uncomfortable, reminding the locals who was in charge now. Well, looky here, Razor boomed, his voice gravelly and amplified by the sudden quiet. Morning, Grandpa. Enjoying your coffee? Arthur met his gaze, his expression unreadable. He took a slow sip of his coffee. Razor's smirk widened. Didn't your mama teach you to answer when spoken to? Or are you deaf, Pops? He stepped closer, leaning down slightly, trying to be intimidating. His breath smelled of stale cigarettes and something bitter. Arthur lowered his cup, setting it carefully on the small table beside him. His hands were steady. I heard you, he said, his voice quiet, level, and surprisingly clear. There was no fear in it. None at all. Razor blinked, momentarily thrown by the lack of the expected trembling fear. Oh, he talks. Good. Thought maybe you were just a lawn ornament, he gestured dismissively at Arthur's simple clothes. You know, this here's Viper territory now. Cost of doing business, even for little pit stops like this, he glanced towards Miller, who stood frozen by the door. Maybe your friend there owes us a little donation. For protection. Miller swallowed hard. We don't have much. We already paid last week. Razor laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. Last week was last week. Things change. Costs go up. Or maybe you just like seeing your place in one piece. He kicked lightly at one of the gas pumps, the metal groaning ominously. Arthur's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. His stillness took on a different quality now, less like passive aging, more like a predator before the strike. He looked at the pump, then back at Razor. Threatening innocent people, Arthur said, his voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel now. Damaging property. That's not doing business. That's just being a bully. Razor recoiled slightly, genuinely surprised by the defiance. Then his face contorted with rage. No one talked to him like that, especially not some frail old man. A bully? You calling me a bully, old-timer? He clenched his fists. You got any idea who you're talking to? Someone who thinks flexing on unarmed civilians makes him a big man, Arthur replied, his gaze unwavering. It doesn't. It just makes you pathetic. Razor roared, lunging forward. This was it, the expected reaction. Arthur, however, wasn't where Razor expected him to be. In a movement too fast for eyes to follow, Arthur wasn't in the chair anymore. He was up. Razor's punch whistled through the air where Arthur's head had been. Arthur didn't just evade, he moved into Razor's space. His hand darted out, not a punch, but a precise strike to Razor's wrist, just above the hand. There was a sharp, sickening crack. Razor screamed, clutching his now useless hand, his face contorted in agony and disbelief. Before Razor could even fully register what happened, Arthur flowed into the next movement. His other hand chopped down like a cleaver onto the back of Razor's neck, a spot that would instantly disrupt the nerves without causing permanent damage, honed by years of training. Razor's eyes rolled back, his massive body going limp as he crumpled to the ground, unconscious before he hit the asphalt. The other Vipers stared, stunned into momentary silence. They had seen their terrifying leader, the man who ruled them through fear, taken down in 2 impossible moves by an old man. Disbelief warred with a dawning, cold fear. Arthur stood over Razor's prone form, his chest rising and falling only slightly faster than normal. He looked towards the other bikers, his eyes, once gentle, now held a fierce, uncompromising light. Anyone else? He asked, his voice calm, but carrying a weight of authority that made the air crackle. One of the Vipers, a burly man named Snake, recovered first. You crazy old coot. You just killed Razor. He's breathing, Arthur corrected calmly. Just taking a nap. Now, you boys have a choice. You can pick him up, get on your little scooters, and ride out of this town forever. Or, he paused, his gaze sweeping over them, you can find out just how bad of a day you can have. Snake drew a knife, its blade glinting. You think you can take all of us? I don't think, Arthur said. I know. He took a single, measured step forward. His posture shifted subtly, his weight lowering, his hands loose but ready. It was the stance of a man who had faced worse odds and walked away victorious. The vipers hesitated. They looked at Razor, twitching faintly on the ground. They looked at Arthur, who looked like he should be playing bingo, but moved like a ghost and hit like a train. The arrogance they had arrived with was bleeding away, replaced by a primal instinct for self-preservation. This wasn't a terrified civilian. This was something else entirely. Snake faltered, lowering his knife slightly. This ain't over, old man, he snarled, trying to salvage some dignity. Yes, Arthur said, his voice flat, it is. For today. Now leave. And don't come back. Slowly, reluctantly, the vipers started to move. Two of them gingerly picked up the still unconscious Razor, draping his heavy form over the back of a bike. The others mounted their machines, casting fearful, resentful glances at Arthur. Engines coughed to life, the roar less confident this time, tinged with humiliation and defeat. They pulled out of the lot, not in a defiant formation, but in a hurried, scrambling retreat, disappearing back down the road they had arrived on. Silence descended again on the gas and go, deeper than before. Miller stood gaping, his mouth slightly open. The young mother slowly unlocked her car door, staring. Arthur watched the last bike disappear, his posture relaxing back into that of a tired old man. He walked back to his chair, picked up his coffee cup, which thankfully hadn't spilled, and took another sip. Arthur, Miller breathed, finding his voice. What in the... How did you... Arthur gave a small, weary smile. Just reflexes, Miller. Been doing this a long time. He sat for a moment longer, letting the adrenaline drain away. But he knew this wasn't over. Razor's pride, and the Viper's operation, wouldn't allow for a simple retreat after such a public humiliation. They would be back. And they would bring more. Arthur pulled a small, battered flip phone from his pocket. It was old technology, but reliable, and the numbers programmed into it weren't listed in any public directory. He flipped it open and scrolled through the few contacts. He stopped at one. A name that brought back memories of dust, sweat, and moments where the line between life and death was thinner than paper. He pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, then was answered on the third ring by a voice that was as quiet and hard as his own had just been. Yeah. The voice was curt, expecting trouble. It's Arthur, he said. Silence on the other end stretched for a beat, the quiet surprise palpable even over the phone line. Arthur. Well, I'll be. Thought you were off knitting sweaters somewhere, old man. The gruffness softened slightly, replaced by a hint of respect and familiarity. What is it? You sound like you're not fishing. I'm not fishing, Cal, Arthur confirmed. Got a situation. Local bullies. Called themselves the Iron Vipers. Just had a run-in. They didn't take it well. I think they're going to escalate. Cal's voice became instantly serious. Iron Vipers. Heard of them. Nasty piece of work. Pushing weight, protection rackets, maybe worse. That sounds about right, Arthur said, watching Miller slowly start to clean up where Razor had fallen. They targeted Miller here. Threatened him. Kicked his pump. Figured I needed to make a call. You handle the boss? Cal asked. There was a knowing quality to the question. Briefly, Arthur understated. Cal chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. Figured. So, what do you need? You calling in the markers? Maybe, Arthur said. Need some eyes and ears. See what they're really into. Where their nerve center is. And maybe some backup. When they come back. Because they will. They sure will, Cal agreed. Nobody walks away from Razor looking like that without wanting heads on pikes. All right, Arthur. It's been a long time. But you call, we answer. I'll make some calls. Be in touch. Don't do anything stupid before we get there, old man. Too late for that, Arthur mumbled, but Cal had already hung up. Arthur closed the phone, slipping it back into his pocket. He looked at the quiet town stretching out beyond the gas station. Peace was a fragile thing. He had fought for it before, in faraway lands, against enemies with names he barely remembered now. It seemed he might have to fight for it again, right here at home. The quiet life was over. Miles away, Razor was starting to come around, his head throbbing, his wrist screaming in pain. He was slumped against a motorcycle, one of his men trying to give him water. His face, bruised and pale, was twisted in a mask of pure, incandescent fury. That old bastard, he spat through clenched teeth. He broke my hand. He made me look like a fool. Snake knelt beside him. He came out of nowhere, Razor. Like a damn ghost. I don't care what he was like. Razor roared, his voice raw. Find out who he is. Where he lives. I want him to pay. I want this whole damn town to pay. Nobody does that to Razor. Another Viper, less shaken, spoke up. Boss, maybe we should just cut our losses. He took down Snake and Butch too before you even got there. Clean. Nobody saw him move. Razor backhanded him across the face, making him stumble. Cut our losses. We own this territory. We let some fossil punk us, we're finished. No. We're going back. We burn that damn gas station to the ground. We find that old man and we make him suffer. And anyone who helped him. He struggled to stand, his good hand gripping his injured wrist. His eyes, usually cold, were burning with a dangerous, almost manic hatred. The retreat from Miller's gas and go hadn't diffused the situation, it had ignited a powder keg. The Iron Vipers were coming back, and their casual cruelty had just escalated into a thirst for brutal vengeance. The quiet town was about to become a battlefield. Tell us where you are watching from in the comments below, and if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. Tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. Arthur spent the rest of the day quietly. He didn't leave town, but he didn't stay at the gas and go either. He drove his old pickup truck, a beat-up Ford that had seen better days but was still reliable, along the roads leading in and out of the area. He noted potential ambush points, alternative routes, places where a small force could hide, or a larger force could be observed without detection. His mind, long retired from such calculations, slipped back into familiar patterns. Terrain analysis, lines of sight, potential choke points. It was second nature, a language he hadn't spoken in years but hadn't forgotten. He stopped by Miller's again later that afternoon. The atmosphere was tense. A few locals had gathered, whispering, watching the road. Miller was trying to act normal, but his hands trembled slightly as he wiped the counter. Any more trouble? Arthur asked, buying a bottle of water. Miller shook his head. No. Not yet. But everyone's scared, Arthur. They saw what happened. They saw Razor go down, but they also know who he is. And they know he won't let this go. He won't, Arthur agreed. That's why we need to be ready. We. Miller looked confused. We, Arthur confirmed. This is your town, Miller. These are your neighbors. Someone has to stand up. But. How? Miller spread his hands helplessly. They're a gang, Arthur. They're violent. We're just folks. You're more than just folks, Miller, Arthur said, his gaze steady. You're a community. And you have me. And I've made a call. As if on cue, Arthur's flip phone buzzed in his pocket. He stepped outside to take the call. It was Cal. "All right, Arthur," Cal said. "Got some intel. The Vipers are based about 50 miles south, in the old abandoned quarry. They've got maybe 30, 40 guys total. Heavily armed. Running drugs, mostly. But they're expanding. Razor's been talking about taking over this whole county." "And his reaction to this morning?" Arthur asked. "Oh, he's spitting nails," Cal confirmed. "Broke wrist confirmed. He's rallied his main guys. Talking about teaching the town a lesson. Burn it down. Looks like they're planning on moving tonight, or maybe first thing tomorrow. Tonight's too soon for them to organize a full-scale assault after what happened," Arthur mused, thinking aloud. "Too much chaos. They'll want to do it right. Make a statement. Probably tomorrow morning. Give Razor time to stew, build up the anger. They'll come in loud, hard, and expecting no resistance." "Sounds about right," Cal said. "So, what's the plan?" "We don't wait for them here," Arthur decided. "This town is too open. Too many civilians at risk. Miller's Gas and Go is too exposed. We hit them before they get here. Or we make them come to us, on our terms." "Our terms, huh?" Cal sounded intrigued. "You got a place in mind?" "There's an old logging road, about 10 miles out of town," Arthur explained, picturing the terrain he'd observed earlier. "Winds through the woods, narrow in places. Comes out near the old mill, on the west side of town. Easy to control. Hard for them to maneuver in force. Lots of cover. A natural choke point," Cal realized. "Nice. Can turn their numbers against them." "Exactly," Arthur said. "But we'll need help. Real help. From the old crew." "Already on it," Cal said. "Made some calls. Sparrows en route from the west coast. Should be here by nightfall. Reaper and Ghost are heading south from the mountains. They can move cross-country, be here by midnight. And I'm about an hour out. Bringing supplies. Standard kit." Arthur felt a flicker of warmth, a connection to a past he had tried to bury. These weren't just names, they were men he had trusted with his life, and who had trusted him with theirs. Former teammates, scattered across the country, who still answered the call when needed. "Good," Arthur said. "Meet me at my place. Little cabin just past the old creek bridge. Nobody goes there." "Copy that. See you soon, Arthur." Arthur hung up. The weight on his shoulders hadn't lessened, but he no longer felt entirely alone. He had backup coming. The best backup a man could ask for. He went back inside. "Miller," he said. "Listen carefully. They're coming back tomorrow. Probably morning. They're going to hit the town." Miller's face paled further. "Tomorrow? But what do we do?" "We get ready," Arthur said. "You need to warn people. Anyone vulnerable. Get them out of town, or somewhere safe. The old storm cellar at the schoolhouse. That's sturdy. Tell them to be there before sunrise." "And you?" Miller asked. "What about you?" "I'm going to handle this," Arthur said. "With some help." He didn't elaborate. Miller looked at him, then at the empty road where the Vipers had disappeared. He saw the quiet conviction in Arthur's eyes. He didn't understand it all, but he understood that Arthur wasn't running. "All right, Arthur," Miller said, nodding slowly. "I'll spread the word. Get people to the schoolhouse." "Good man," Arthur said. He paid for his water. "Stay safe, Miller." He left the Gas and Go, heading towards his pickup. He had things to prepare. His cabin was small, unassuming from the outside, but inside, beneath floorboards and behind hidden panels, lay the carefully maintained tools of his former trade. Cleaning kits, durable communication gear, maps, and a few items that were strictly non-civilian issue. He retrieved what he needed, packing a sturdy bag. As dusk settled, Arthur sat on his porch, cleaning a suppressed pistol with practiced ease. The movements were fluid, economical, a dancer's grace applied to lethal purpose. He watched the shadows lengthen, the quiet of the evening a stark contrast to the violence that was coming. His mind drifted back, briefly, to other nights like this. Nights before a mission, the air thick with anticipation, the knowledge that tomorrow might not come. He was younger then, operating under a different name. The jungle was a suffocating blanket of heat and noise. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere. His team moved like ghosts, silent, efficient. They were deep behind enemy lines, tasked with a mission that sounded impossible. There were 5 of them. Just 5, against a fortified enemy compound. Arthur remembered the tension, the absolute focus. Cal was the demolitions expert, quiet and precise. Sparrow was the scout, light on his feet, eyes like a hawk. Reaper was the heavy weapons man, capable of impossible shots. Ghost was the communications and intel specialist, the link to the outside world. And Arthur, leading them, the strategist, the man who saw the whole board. They were good. The best. They completed the mission against all odds, leaving nothing but confusion and chaos in their wake. But they didn't all come back. The memory brought a familiar ache, a ghost limb of pain that never quite faded. He had buried that life, piece by piece, trying to find peace. But some things, once learned, could never truly be forgotten. A vehicle approached, its headlights cutting through the gloom. Not a loud, aggressive motorcycle, but a quiet, powerful SUV. It pulled up the dirt track to his cabin. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He was lean and wiry, moving with a restless energy. His face was a network of fine wrinkles around sharp, intelligent eyes. This was Cal. "Arthur," Cal said, a small smile touching his lips. "Looks like you haven't lost your touch for picking remote locations." "Cal," Arthur nodded, standing up. The pistol disappeared into his bag with a final click. "Thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it," Cal said, opening the back of the SUV. It was packed with gear, tactical vests, communication headsets, more weapons cases, medical supplies. Brought a little something to level the playing field. They spent the next hour catching up, not on personal lives, that wasn't their way, but on capabilities, on recent technological advancements in gear, on the general state of the world and the kind of threats they might face, even from a local gang. Cal confirmed the intel. The Vipers were indeed planning to move at dawn. Soon after, another vehicle arrived. This one was a sturdy, all-terrain truck. Out stepped a tall, silent man whose face was almost entirely obscured by a thick, dark beard and a low-brimmed hat, Reaper. With him was a figure whose movements were so fluid and quiet they seemed to melt out of the truck, Ghost. "Arthur," Reaper said, his voice a low rumble. "Good to see you up and about." "Reaper, Ghost." "Glad you could make it," Arthur replied. They didn't waste time on pleasantries. It was straight to business. They reviewed the intel, discussed the terrain, and Arthur laid out his plan. "The logging road," Arthur explained, spreading a worn map on his table. "Here. This section. It's perfect. They'll be strung out. We can control the engagement. Take them piece by piece." Ghost, ever the analyst, pointed to a spot on the map. "There's a ridge running parallel here. Good for overwatch." "Reaper, that's your spot." Reaper nodded. "Got it." Sparrow arrived last, a woman as agile and observant as her namesake. She was slender, deceptively fragile-looking, but moved with the coiled power of a spring. Her eyes, bright and alert, missed nothing. "Sorry I'm late," she said, dropping her pack. Had to ditch a tail in Portland. Looked like amateurs, but you never know. Sparrow, Arthur said, a genuine smile finally touching his lips. Perfect timing. You're on point. They'll never see you coming. With the team assembled, the cabin became a hive of quiet, focused activity. Gear was checked, weapons prepped, tactics discussed. They weren't the young soldiers they once were, but the skills were ingrained, the teamwork seamless. They were older, perhaps slower in some ways, but also smarter, more experienced, and with a profound understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. They were a well-oiled machine, reactivated after years of dormancy. The atmosphere wasn't one of bravado, but of grim determination. They were fighting for Arthur's town, for innocent people threatened by thugs. It was a cause they understood, a line they couldn't let others cross. This wasn't about adventure, it was about duty, about protecting the weak, about ensuring justice was served, even when the official channels failed. As the hours ticked by, the plan solidified. It was classic Arthur, deceptively simple on the surface, but layered with contingencies and leveraging the unique skills of each team member. Sparrow would infiltrate ahead, providing real-time updates on the Viper's movement. Reaper would take the high ground, ready to provide covering fire or neutralize key threats at long range. Ghost would handle communications and electronic countermeasures, ensuring the Vipers couldn't call for unexpected backup. Cal would be with Arthur, providing close support, explosives expertise if needed, and another skilled gun. Arthur would be the primary engagement force, drawing their attention, leading them into the trap, and neutralizing the main body of their force in the confined space of the logging road. His experience in close-quarters combat and disarming multiple opponents would be crucial. Just before dawn, they moved. Silent as shadows, they left the cabin, heading towards the old logging road. The air was cool and damp, the woods still dark. The townspeople, hopefully safe in the school cellar, slept, unaware of the quiet war being waged on their behalf just miles away. Meanwhile, at the Iron Viper's quarry base, Razor was in a frenzy. His wrist was throbbing, and the humiliation of the previous day had festered into a cold, hard rage. He barked orders, his voice hoarse. "Gear up," he yelled. "We roll at first light. Snake, you take the lead. I want that old man's head on my bike rack. And I want that gas station burned to the ground." Snake looked hesitant. "Boss, maybe we should think this through. That old guy wasn't normal. He's old. And alone." Razor snarled. "He got lucky. Now get moving." The Vipers, fueled by fear of Razor and their own bruised egos, began preparing. They strapped on weapons, revved engines, their usual swagger mixed with a nervous energy. They expected to face a terrified town, easy prey. They had no idea they were riding into a meticulously planned ambush. As the first sliver of sun touched the horizon, the Iron Vipers roared out of the quarry, a long line of motorcycles heading north, towards the quiet town and the vengeance Razor craved. They were loud, confident in their numbers and firepower. Up ahead, hidden in the dense woods bordering the logging road, Sparrow lay prone, watching them approach through high-powered binoculars. Her communications earpiece crackled faintly. "They're on the move," she whispered into her microphone. "Heading your way. Entering the logging road now. Looks like the whole damn circus." Arthur, Cal, and Ghost were positioned deeper in the woods, near the narrowest part of the road. Reaper was already in place on the ridge, a silent guardian angel with a scoped rifle. "Copy, Sparrow," Arthur responded calmly. "Maintain observation. Report any deviations." "Will do." The sound of the approaching motorcycles grew louder, echoing through the trees. The ground began to vibrate faintly. The Vipers were riding right into the trap. Razor was riding near the front, despite his injured wrist, his face set in a grim, vengeful mask. He was eager to inflict pain, to erase the memory of his humiliation. As the first bikes rounded a bend and entered the narrow section of the logging road, Sparrow's voice came through the comms again. Lead element entering engagement zone. Full force looks committed to the road. Acknowledged, Arthur said. He glanced at Cal and Ghost, who nodded, ready. The motorcycles were loud now, filling the confined space. Riders were forced to slow down, unable to ride side by side, creating a long, vulnerable column. Arthur waited until the majority of the Vipers were in the killing zone. Then, he gave the command. Execute. Cal, positioned slightly ahead and off to the side, triggered a series of small, strategically placed explosive charges. Not designed to kill, but to create chaos and confusion. They weren't standard explosives, they were non-lethal, designed to disorient, releasing concussive force and blinding flashes. Boom! 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 The charges detonated, one after another, right in the middle of the Viper column. Motorcycles swerved, riders were thrown, engines stalled. The air filled with startled shouts and curses. The element of surprise was absolute. Before the Vipers could recover, Arthur and Cal emerged from the trees, moving with impossible speed and coordination. They didn't pull out assault rifles and spray bullets indiscriminately. That wasn't Arthur's way. His method was surgical, precise, designed to neutralize the threat efficiently. Arthur moved like a blur, targeting the riders closest to him. He used short, brutal strikes, disarming them, disabling their bikes, taking them down with ruthless efficiency. A well-placed kick to a front will sent a bike spinning, a sharp elbow to a jaw dropped a rider, a lightning-fast wrench of a limb incapacitated another. He wasn't fighting fair, he was fighting smart, using the element of surprise and the Viper's disarray to his advantage. Cal was right beside him, a force of nature with a tactical shotgun loaded with beanbag rounds, using it less as a firearm and more as a blunt instrument to control space and deliver non-lethal force. He moved with practiced economy, backing Arthur up, preventing Vipers from flanking them. From the ridge, Reaper was not idle. He wasn't targeting the rank and file. His shots were aimed at specific threats, the Viper openly raising a pistol, the one trying to throw a grenade, the one reaching for a rifle strapped to his bike. Each shot was precise, taking down the most dangerous individuals with non-lethal rounds, removing their immediate threat to Arthur and Cal. The sound of Reaper's suppressed rifle was barely a whisper over the shouts and confusion below. Ghost, unseen, was running interference on their radios, flooding their frequencies, making it impossible for them to coordinate or call for help. They were isolated, disoriented, and under attack from an unseen enemy. The Vipers, arrogant and overconfident just moments before, were plunged into a nightmare. They were used to terrorizing defenseless people, not facing organized, professional resistance. Their formation was broken, their communication cut, their leaders taken down or incapacitated. They were thugs, not soldiers, and they folded under pressure. Razor, caught towards the front, was thrown from his bike by the initial blasts. He landed hard, his broken wrist sending a fresh wave of agony through him. He looked up, dazed, and saw Arthur moving through his men like a phantom, leaving a trail of incapacitated bodies. "Stop him!" Razor screamed, trying to scramble to his feet. "Shoot him! Shoot the old man!" But his men were too busy trying to defend themselves, too scattered and confused. Those who managed to draw weapons were instantly targeted by Reaper from the ridge. Those who tried to rush Arthur found themselves on the receiving end of his brutal efficiency. It wasn't a prolonged battle. It was a rout. Within minutes, the logging road was a scene of tangled motorcycles and groaning Vipers. Arthur, Cal, Sparrow, who had moved down from her observation post, and Ghost converged, moving among the defeated bikers, securing weapons, ensuring no one was seriously hurt, but no one was getting away either. Razor watched, his face a mask of impotent fury and disbelief, as Arthur walked towards him. Arthur stopped a few feet away. He wasn't even breathing hard. "I told you this morning," Arthur said, his voice calm. "You're just a bully. And bullies always back down when someone stands up to them." You can't do this, Razor choked out, his voice trembling with pain and rage. We're the Vipers. We own this. Not anymore, Arthur said simply. He gestured to his team, who were efficiently securing the Vipers with zip ties. You came here looking for trouble. You found it. Suddenly, from deeper in the woods, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the air. Blue and red lights began to flash through the trees. Razor looked startled. Cops? How? Arthur glanced towards Ghost, who gave a slight nod. Part of Ghost's task had been ensuring that, once the Vipers were neutralized and secured, the local authorities were alerted, but not too early. They needed the backup, but they didn't need the complications of involving the police in the initial, less-than-official takedown. A few moments later, Sheriff Brody's cruiser, followed by a couple of deputy vehicles, arrived cautiously at the scene. Brody was a good man, honest, but overwhelmed by the recent rise of the Vipers. He stepped out, his hand hovering near his sidearm, his eyes wide as he took in the scene, dozens of bikers zip-tied on the ground, tangled motorcycles, Arthur and his team standing calmly among them. Arthur? Sheriff Brody looked utterly bewildered. What? What happened here? Arthur walked over, leaving Razor to stare in stunned silence. Morning, Sheriff, Arthur said. Appears we had a bit of a traffic incident. These fellows had an accident. On their way to visit the town, I believe. Brody looked at the incapacitated Vipers, then at Arthur and his team. He might not have understood the how, but he understood the what. The Iron Vipers, the gang that had been terrorizing his county, were neutralized. He looked at the professionalism in Arthur's quiet demeanor, the way his companions moved with quiet competence. This wasn't random luck. An accident, Brody repeated, a slow understanding dawning in his eyes. He looked at Razor, who was still glaring daggers. Right. Looks like a pretty bad 1-inch. Could have been worse, Arthur said. We contained it before they got into town. Brody nodded, comprehension settling in. He didn't need to know the details of Arthur's past, or the skills of his friends. He just needed to see that a major criminal element had been dealt with, decisively and without civilian casualties in town. All right, Arthur, Brody said, lowering his hand from his sidearm. We'll take it from here. Appreciate the containment, he motioned to his deputies. All right boys, looks like we got a lot of paperwork. And a lot of arrests to make. The deputies, some looking as surprised as Brody, got to work, cuffing the Vipers and starting the process of impounding the bikes. Razor, still sputtering threats and obscenities about Arthur, was roughly hauled to his feet and cuffed, his broken wrist protected as per Arthur's quiet instruction to Brody. Arthur and his team didn't linger. As the first police cars arrived, they faded back into the woods as quietly as they had emerged. They retrieved their hidden gear and made their way back towards Arthur's cabin. Back at the cabin, as the sun rose higher, they cleaned their weapons, packed their gear, and shared a quiet meal. There was no triumphant celebration, just a shared sense of accomplishment and duty fulfilled. Well, Arthur, Cal said, sipping his coffee. Looks like you still got it. We still got it, Arthur corrected. Couldn't have done it without you. Sparrow smiled faintly. Just like old times, huh? Not quite, Arthur said, looking out at the peaceful woods. Higher stakes, in a way. This was home. Reaper, silent for most of the time, spoke up. Town seems safe now. Brody's a decent guy. He'll handle the fallout. He will, Arthur agreed. And maybe this sends a message. That you can't just roll into a quiet place and take whatever you want. By late morning, Cal, Sparrow, Reaper, and Ghost were gone, disappearing back to their scattered lives across the country. They left as quietly as they arrived, leaving Arthur once again alone in his small cabin. Arthur drove back towards town. He stopped at Miller's Gas and Go. The police were gone, the crime scene tape being taken down. Miller was there, talking to a few neighbors, his face etched with exhaustion but also relief. When Arthur pulled up, Miller's face broke into a wide, grateful grin. The neighbors turned, their eyes filled with a mixture of awe and respect. "Arthur!" Miller called out, walking towards him. "Sheriff Brody told us." "Well, he didn't say much, but he said you were involved. Said you and some friends stopped them. All of them." "They had a bad morning," Arthur said lightly. "A bad morning?" Miller laughed, a shaky, joyful sound. "Arthur, you saved us. You saved the town. We heard the blasts, the sirens. We were terrified. But then, nothing. Just the police showing up and taking them away." Other townsfolk approached, hesitant at first, then bolder. They thanked him, their voices filled with genuine gratitude. They looked at him differently now. Not just an old man in a baseball cap, but the quiet strength who had stood between them and the wolves. Arthur accepted their thanks with quiet humility. He didn't want fanfare. He just wanted the peace he had sought for so long to return. "You know," one of the neighbors, an older woman named Eleanor, said, her voice soft. "We underestimated you, Arthur. We saw an old man. We didn't see who you really are." Arthur gave a small, sad smile. "People often see what they expect to see, Eleanor. Sometimes that's a good thing." He stayed for a while, talking quietly with Miller and the others. He didn't talk about the specifics of the morning, or his past. He talked about rebuilding, about looking out for each other, about not letting fear win. The defeat of the Iron Vipers sent ripples through the region. Other small towns heard the story, a powerful gang, taken down in a single, decisive action in some backwoods logging road. The legend of the quiet old man and his mysterious friends began to grow, a whisper of hope for places that had been terrorized by similar groups. Gangs became more wary, less likely to target communities without knowing who might be hidden within them. The balance of power, in this corner of the world at least, had shifted. In the town, a new sense of unity began to emerge. The shared fear had given way to shared relief and a newfound appreciation for each other. Miller's Gas and Go became even more of a community hub, a place where people felt safe to gather. Arthur Jenkins returned to his quiet life. He still sat outside Miller's, still drank his lukewarm coffee, still watched the world with those sharp, observant eyes. But now, when people saw him, they saw something more. They saw the quiet strength, the unwavering resolve. They saw the man who had reminded them that even the smallest among us can possess the power to stand against overwhelming darkness. He had sought peace, and for a while, it seemed the world wouldn't let him have it. But by confronting the threat, by reactivating the skills he had tried to leave behind, he had not only protected his home but had also, perhaps, found a different kind of peace. A peace earned through struggle, through standing firm for what was right. He was still an old man, yes. But he was also a protector, a symbol, a quiet legend in the town he called home. And the Iron Vipers, and anyone else who thought to prey on the weak, would forever remember the day they laughed at the old man in the gas station, only to learn that true strength wears no uniform and makes no boast. Respect, Arthur knew, wasn't demanded through fear and violence. It was earned through action, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice. And sometimes, it took an old man with a hidden past to remind the world of that simple truth. The town was safe, not because of walls or weapons, but because its quietest resident had decided enough was enough. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.